I must say I am so excited to be with you all today, and especially on this platform of HR Girlfriends, because so much of what we're going to be talking about is how we as women treat ourselves, and also as we as women treat our girlfriends. So, so I'm happy to be here. I'm delighted to be getting to know HR Girlfriends and the wonderful Sana. So thank you, Sana, and thanks for your invitation. We're going to be doing an overview today of the Girly Thoughts 10-day detox plan, and as the subtitle says, a resilient woman's guide to saying no to negative self-talk and yes to personal power. And this concept of girly thoughts was introduced in a book that I wrote last year called The Resilient Woman. And so many of you were so curious about girly thoughts that it just demanded its own book. So this book came out in October, and this will be the focus of what we'll be talking about today. So let's start with you and look at these questions and ask yourself, is this who you want to be? Do you want to be someone who knows how to work with herself? And I want to back up just for a moment and say I'm also a psychologist in New York State. I have been seeing women for many years, and this whole concept of resiliency and specifically girly thoughts has come out of my work with women, and really trying to understand what it was I was hearing every day in sessions with women who came in with real issues, big things that were going on in their life, and yet a unique thing that is so specific to women is there was also this subtext of really what I have come to call girly thoughts, and that's what we're going to be really looking at today. So are you someone who wants to know how to work with yourself, because we are all incredibly complex? Are you someone who wants to make her strengths conscious? And what I mean by that is we all walk around with our strength, we walk around in our power, but for many of us, we don't feel that that is something that is comfortable to be conscious of. That somehow, for some of us, being powerful is decidedly unfeminine. Are you someone who wants to be able to nurture herself? In the words of that wonderful Queen song, are you someone who, when she gets knocked down, gets up again? Are you someone who doesn't want to be trapped, what's been called corporate images of beauty? That's a term I love, because that is so much what we are dealing with, that it's no longer that we are trying to be like the movie stars of the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s. We're now dealing with digitized image of beauty that are really corporately based. I had a woman in a radio interview show that I did who called in, and she said, I'm a model, and I wake up every morning and I feel depressed that when I look in the mirror, I don't look like me. And my heart broke for her. I'm thinking, my God, she has really bought into the Photoshop version of who she is. And that's the real her. And that's that whole corporate image that surrounds us of what a beautiful woman is supposed to look like, and as we'll see, act like. So corporate images of beauty is a huge thing, and that's part of our girly thoughts. Are you someone who wants to pull up past solutions to current problems? That's your resiliency. Are you someone who wants to be able to build on what works for you? That's your resiliency. And what gets in the way of doing all this? Those girly thoughts. And by the way, this term girly thoughts is a purposely annoying term. I want you to know that. This is purposely annoying, and I developed it for two reasons. One is because it's memorable. And secondly, because if you have a way of labeling what's going on with you, if you have a way of labeling these concepts that are bothering you, then you have a way of externalizing them. And in externalizing them, then you have a way of saying, well, that's how I'm thinking. That's not who I am. That's how I'm thinking. So from a those of you who've ever been in therapy from a psychodynamic point of view, having a way of labeling a thought is very important, a first step in moving beyond it. So these are the societal images, often reinforced by families and our friends, which is why I love being with HR girlfriends, because we can help our friends, that are sabotaging, self-limiting, toxic, and that very importantly that consume our energy and misdirect our goals and interfere with us feeling fulfilled. You know, all of us only have so much energy, and if your energy is consumed by beating yourself up, then it's not going to go for the other things you want, like the raise that you want to get, or figuring out this challenge in the office, or figuring out how to ask for help when you're in a thorny HR situation, which I know, just having managed parts of the federal government, working in nonprofits, I always made my HR director my best friend because things get tough and you really need to figure out how to take care of these things. So, you know, it's very important to be able to really look at and reach out to other women. So what do some of these girly thoughts look like? It goes like this: if only I was thinner or younger or prettier or into kinkier sex. 50 Shades of Grey has just hit the market, and we all know what that is about. And evidently this film that borders on condoning you know, women being abused yet again is an international bestseller. If only I didn't want children. And this is a big one. I've seen so many women who have said, if only I wasn't so smart or wasn't so brainy. In fact, Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote Lean In an interview, talked about the fact that she was very concerned when she was in high school and college because she was so smart that she wouldn't get dates. You know, this is a worry that we all walk around with. So what happens with girly thoughts? Girly thoughts result in women feeling less entitled and, very unfortunately, performing less well professionally. Why? Because we get all consumed by all of this stuff in us about, you know, that we're not somehow making the mark, you know, in terms of our looks or in terms of our actions. And what we wind up doing is then berating ourselves as a result of not measuring up to these societal standards of beauty and behavior. So the impact of girly thoughts, it sets up this negative, consuming inner dialogue. And it has us running, literally running from who we are, from our strengths, and also from our needs, because we feel there's something wrong with beauty. And it results in us not being as successful as we want to be and also can be at work. And I know a couple of you will be nodding your heads with this, taking too much responsibility in relationships. You know, we forget that a relationship is composed of two people. Instead, it becomes focused on us and what we've done wrong. And for some, needing to self-medicate through eating away our feelings, excessive alcohol, even drug use, or what I'm seeing with many women is more and more gambling, is excessive exercise, or even silencing our needs, resulting in depression. And Sanaa, does this kind of sound like what you see from your vantage point, and you know, in HR, and also, you know, as the founder of a really important women's organization? You know, what's your take on this, what we've been talking about so far?
Oh, so far so good. I mean, the content is real. I mean, as a woman, I also have the girly thoughts, and as an HR director, you know, as you're handling performance issues and things of that nature, you always, to some degree, understand that sometimes it's deeper than what we see on the surface, and sometimes it is this, you know, gender issues, and how the girly thoughts plays a part in that. And because I am a woman, I get to see that perspective. I can't always play into it in the work environment. But, I mean, you're dead on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I look forward to getting your questions and also your comments in that chat box as we go through this. So here's a little quiz, if you will. And just take this on your own, but, you know, just as a way of looking into yourself, you know, taking 2 minutes to really check things out. Are you ruled by your girly thoughts? Do you feel your worth comes from your looks and not from who you are? And in case you're saying, no, that's not true, when you look in the mirror, what do you look at? And are you happy with what you see? Or do you start detailing this and that, and your stomach is too big, or you've got wrinkles, or you're getting gray, which, by the way, I think is the Creator's way of saying that life is not black or white, because in case you haven't figured it out, as we all get older, we get gray, and that's the midpoint. It's not looking for perfection. Are you critical of your body shape or size? I had one woman recently who, in a therapy session, was talking about just this very complex work situation she's in, and she said, apropos of how she felt, not, I think, of reality, she said, and I'm too tall. And she really felt that was getting in the way because of her size, not just her opinion and how smart she was. Do you feel the key to getting what you want and deserve is to be close to perfect? And when you encounter misfortune, do you blame yourself by saying, I am not, and you can fill in the blank, so I deserve this, so I'm not thin enough or young enough or smart enough, or I'm not subservient enough or quiet enough, so therefore I deserve this nonsense, whatever it is. And do you worry that you are too smart, aggressive, and, by the way, beautiful? The reason why beautiful is in here is because we women do something to other women, and we compete with them. And we compete with them in what's being called under-the-radar competition. And we compete with other women, and it happens at work by, you know, dissing how they look, dissing how beautiful they are, dissing how they show off. And I have this covered, by the way, in blogs that are on my website and videos that are up there as well that, you know, please feel free to go to. Do you ever blame another woman's misfortune, such as an unfaithful partner, on her weight or clothes or actions? In psychotherapy and in watching movies and in watching TV shows, it's amazing to me how much the storyline is that the man's affairs, if you will, are somehow a result of his wife's whatever, as opposed to seeing it as whatever he's dealing with, he's responsible for his actions. It's not because his wife is tired at the end of the day, or that they've had 3 kids who are noisy, or anything else. It's really his responsibility. And yet, in storylines, in in conversation, when we look at in the checkout line in in supermarkets, and we look at the the magazine covers, they're all blaming women for something because of their looks or actions. And do you worry about getting older because you won't be seen as attractive? Real issue. I know we have some counters to that. We have the cougars, which I think is wonderful. But it is a real issue. We live in a very youth culture, so how are we going to feel good about ourselves in a culture that not just celebrates youth, but also even digitizes it? So even the young women who are, beautiful to begin with are, made to be positively porcelain in their appearance, because that's the only way that they can be seen as having value. If any of you watch TV, I'm sure the commercial I'm about to mention to you will ring a bell, and that is of this guy who's clearly in his 60s. He has a beard, and he's water skiing or skydiving or skiing, and And then at the end of his athletic triumphs, he's in a bar drinking a certain brand of beer, surrounded by teenage girls who are Googling him. That is kind of the epitome of the culture we live in, about how youth-focused it is and how men, get more interesting and, as they get older, and women don't. So what are we going to do with that? We can stop internalizing it and believing it, and we can stop blaming ourselves because, if we're lucky enough to live, we are going to age. Another way that girly thoughts attack us is this whole thing about if we are a good girl. If we listen to all the rules, then we believe that life is going to work out the way we wish it would. And we blame ourselves because we've done everything right, so how come we've encountered misfortune? And that's another girly thought, like I can control life if I'm a really good girl, whatever that means. And we all know in our families and our faith that we have been raised to be good girls, and we also know how impossible it is to really be that good girl. But that doesn't mean that we therefore, deserve all the nonsense that comes our way as part of life. So, take a moment and think about this. How do your girly thoughts affect you? And here are just some of the areas of your life that you may want to think about. And in my book, The Girly Thought 10-Day Detox Plan, I talk about how we can literally detox from how our girly thoughts affect us in our intimate life and also in our public life. So in our public life at work, how do your girly thoughts affect you? Do you feel you have to be nice at work? Do you feel you have to be quiet at work? Do you feel you need to wait until you're called upon in a meeting? If you make a wonderful point in a meeting and a male colleague picks up on that point, 5 minutes later, do you feel it's not appropriate to say, thanks, Mike, for bringing up the point I made a couple of minutes ago and elaborating on it? With your friends, how do your girly thoughts come out? Do you really wind up judging your friends because of their looks? Do you blame them for the problems they have with their boyfriends because they've gained 10 pounds? With your intimate partner, and I deal with this so much in my book, and I really encourage you to really look at the book and look at the blogs. There's been, oops, sorry about that. There's been some very interesting research and thinking by women psychologists and women philosophers about what's happened with beauty and how that's really affected intimate relationships. And one woman who I quote in the book says that we have become so consumed about the need to kiss beautifully that we don't kiss with feeling. We are so concerned about how we look in bed that we don't enjoy sex. I mean, this whole focus on beauty is really destroying our ability to feel good about ourselves. And so that is a whole area where girly thoughts are really huge and alive. In public, how do you feel your girly thoughts affect you? Do you feel that your girly thoughts really dictate how you dress when you go out? Do you feel you need to dress to go to the supermarket because you're not sure who you'll meet, as opposed to going out and being comfortable because it's a Saturday and it's your day off and you need milk? At home with your daughter, are you inadvertently teaching her the same toxic messages that you have learned? And what can you do about that? There's a lot we can do with our children, but first we have to be aware that this is what's going on. One of the exercises I have in my book that is actually a kind of fun one is when you watch TV with your daughter to really pick out the girly thoughts of the different characters that you are seeing and hearing, and also pick out characters who don't buy into this. For example, the protagonist in How to Get Away with Murder doesn't buy into this, but notice how strident everybody feels she is, because she doesn't play nice all the time. And another show, which is also an example of this, is Madam Secretary. Here is a woman in a marriage with children. I think it's the only TV show where there's actually somebody married with children who has a major career. And how complicated it is, how tricky it is to stay connected to her husband and to her children, especially that oldest daughter, because it is complicated. So how do we teach our daughters about being women? How do we teach our nieces or our granddaughters even about how to be women and what the messages are that are coming in and how to deal with them and how to identify them as a girly thought so we can push them away and not have them identify us? And how do our girly thoughts make us feel about ourselves? I mean, what is going on? What is uniquely ours that is draining our power and our attention and our energy? And that could be, you know, anything, you know, from the fine wrinkles we may be getting, you know, around our eyes to sagging breasts to having just come off of Valentine's Day and gained 5 pounds by all that chocolate. You know, all these things are things that consume us. And by the way, men don't walk around worried about things like this. They have other things they worry about. I'm not saying men are, you know, scot-free, but they don't have this level of personal antagonism that goes on all day long in their head, which I call girly thoughts. And by the way, how I came to the name Girly Thoughts was I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I talk about this in my book, a fellow psychologist, Tom Lund, who's also an author, by the way. And we were talking about this thing we women do, and he said, girly thoughts. And I had one of those moments where I felt, you know, kind of the, you know, the sky opened up and the lights shone down, and I said, girly thoughts. And he said, yes, girly thoughts. And I said, Tom, are you going to do anything with that? And he said, look at me, Pat, I'm a guy. No. He said, have at it. And I really felt for me that helped capture something that I haven't heard captured in quite a succinct way before. So early thoughts. Yes.
Well, Pat, I have a question for you. So, or I just wanted to share because these are some really good, insightful thoughts. And I thought, wow, you know, the one that hit me, of course, because it's the first one, is at work. And for me at work, those thoughts are real. I'm in an environment where it's male-dominated. My leadership is male. We're pretty flat in the organization. So I have a seat at the table. But when I'm there, I can't help but feel like, oh, I'm African American, and maybe that played a role in what he just said, or maybe I should not be as assertive because, you know, that may be offensive to some of the people at the table. And sometimes I lose track of what I'm there to do because my girly thoughts, now I have a label for them, are prevalent, and I have to sort of talk myself off the ledge, and I'm like, no, that's perfectly fine. Or when something occurs at work, and I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to get fired. And then they give me a raise. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. Obviously, there was a disconnect between my thoughts and what they're actually thinking. And so it's just that absolutely hit home for me.
Well, I'm so glad, because we forget that at work, when we are hired, we are not hired to make coffee. We are not hired to look pretty. We are hired to do a job. And everyone listening today has been hired because they have a skill set that your organization has determined they need. What we need to do as women is to show that skill set. And that means flying in the face of all the cultural stuff that goes on that is real and has been documented. 2 studies I want to very quickly quote. One is a study that took place at the beginning of last year, and they looked at performance evaluations from Fortune 500 companies, and they looked at language about personality. How many of men had negative language about their personality versus how many women, and these were all managers in Fortune 500 companies, had negative language about their personality. So now, do you want to guess how many men versus how many women, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, had negative language in their performance evaluation at a Fortune 500 company, because the difference between them was staggering.
I almost want to say none, but I'm sure there's one guy out there. I can't, honestly, you know what? That's a good one. I can't guess. Tell me.
Right. Well, it was 2% of the men versus 70%.
Wow.
70% of managers in Fortune 500 companies who were women had negative language, not about their performance, but about their personality. You know, it's real. What we're talking about is real. So the question is, what are we going to do about that? And are we going to continue to do to ourselves what society does to us? And when we do it to ourselves, that's our girly thoughts. You know, society's doing a great job of doing it to us. We don't have to buy in. Because remember, when we were hired, it was to do a job. It wasn't, I don't know if any of you have seen this show. I've seen a couple of times, Agent Carter, and it takes place post-World War II. And she's basically been hired because she's somewhat decorative, even though she has all these skills. Thank God that's changed. We are hired because we have skills, but we're still thought we should be decorative. But we don't have to buy into that. So, thanks. Good interaction there, Sanaa. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, some examples of girly thoughts. At work, I'm coming on too strong and I won't be liked. You know, it's real. It's also real that at work, supervisors look for people who have lots of ideas, who come on strong, who when they get knocked down, they come back with something. Women are often seen when they don't do that as passive, non-leaders, fearful, that they can't handle themselves. When we play by the rules, it disadvantages us. So it's a good way of saying that's a girly thought and I shouldn't play by that. There's also a fear women have that they're going to screw something up. There's a real performance fear many women have in the workplace because women have learned to be risk adverse. Why have they learned to be risk adverse? What the research is talking to us about is because so many of us as women did not play competitive sports, that when we reach puberty, which we now know can be as young as 9, we focus on fashion and we drop out of soccer. And the reality is we don't learn the give and take. We take things too personally. And that doesn't help us. It just doesn't help us. So we become afraid of screwing something up as opposed to being excited about trying something and seeing what happens and not being that invested in it. We're oversensitive because we take things personally. And when we encounter something, we may conclude we're not lovable. Or if our daughter or son does something, we may blame ourselves and feel we are a terrible mother, as opposed to realizing this child did have 2 parents. When something happens with our friend, we may blame ourselves and feel we're a terrible friend. What I see is so many women coming in into my office and really thinking they're crazy because they're having all these negative thoughts about themselves, and they're dealing with, you know, trying to take care of an aging parent or a problem at work or whatever it is that they may be focused on. So they think they're the problem. So having a name for it, I think, helps them realize they're not the problem. It's the thinking that they have, which is not helpful to them. Another example of a girly thought is I'm old or not desirable. And this, one of my favorite is I'm bad with math. That is still such a gender issue. There's a wonderful website for girls in middle school to try to get them involved in engineering called Engineer Your Life, to try to get girls excited about math. There's still in growth areas in our economy, which are heavily math related, women are still very underrepresented. Now that's not genetic, that's thinking. I'll give you an example. I had a couple of weeks ago 2 examples where I basically had the same conversation with 2 women. One is the executive director of an organization where I'm on, I think, chair of the scientific advisory committee. And the other was a 15-year-old in my office. And the executive director said she wanted to go on and get a graduate degree. And I said, oh, well, what are you interested in? Are you interested maybe in getting an MBA? By the way, she's running a large nonprofit. And she said, no, I'm no good with math. So I challenged her. The girl in my office, 15 years old, I said, well, what are you interested in? And she said, well, I'm interested in art. I said, why art? She said, because I'm no good with math. You know, there's something that's really still bizarre about how many women feel they are not good with math, and I think that's cultural. I don't think our brains are wired in that way, that we are somehow not good with math. And then we blame another girly thought is I'm a loser, nothing I do ever works out, blah, 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 blah. Very counterproductive thinking that really doesn't help us get anywhere. So why a girly thought detox plan? Because we can change our thinking. We really can change our thinking. You know, you deserve to evolve how you think about yourself. And just because you've thought one way about yourself doesn't mean you have to keep thinking that way. You can change how you're treating yourself. And detoxing, which is, you know, it's a very powerful word, a detox plan. Well, I think that's because I know I'm using it because this is very negative language we're using with ourselves that we would not have anybody use with our children. We would not have anybody knowingly use with our friends, but it's okay for us to do it to ourselves. Detoxing results in a change in how we act. One of the things I recommend in my book is, you know, perhaps around some things you need to fake it till you make it. So you push yourself to speak up in a meeting as opposed to trying to be nice and wait your turn or not be seen as aggressive. Detoxing will result in how successful you are and also how successful you feel. This is all about taking care of yourself and not allowing excuse me, all these cultural messages to get in the way. Just because somebody says something about you, it doesn't make it true. And also, detoxing will result in a huge difference with how much you like and value yourself. Excuse me. It's about 0 degrees to where I am, and the sun is coming in the window and giving me a tickle. So how do you do this? To really begin to focus in on a detox plan, you need to get support in identifying what your girly thoughts are. And how do you do that? I have groups that are beginning to work with this in women's management, just using this concept and using the book as a way of, and my blogs, as a way of just stimulating discussion about what this is and how it is affecting people at work, getting support from your friends, getting support in your family. We've just gone through the holidays, and at the holiday time, one of the things that we all experience is, you know, the wonderfulness of families getting together and talking and also sharing family stories. One of the things you can do as a way of beginning to change the girly thoughts in your family is to challenge some of the thinking that really puts women down in some of the stories that exist in families. And so it's an area you can have some fun with, and in the book I really detail some steps in how to do that. You can have fun dealing with girly thoughts just looking at TV, movies, articles, and and really pointing out what's going on there. What is the criticism about, we're going to have the Oscars, so a big thing is going to be who's showing too much of what on Oscar night, as if that's a big surprise or it makes a big difference. But there'll be all this kind of dissing that goes on about the gowns. Interesting. The gowns become more important than the power of the different actresses, than their guts in portraying sometimes not very wonderful, appealing roles, but powerful roles, powerful women. So maybe on Oscar night, have some fun and pull out girly thoughts with your friends or family members as you're watching the Oscars. You need to create community around you to do this. It's fun to do with somebody. You can do it on your own. It's much better to do it with somebody so you get support for it, so you can kick those girly thoughts to the curb. Understand what the personal consequences to you are of your girly thoughts. What is causing you to think in a way that's really clearly contrary to your own self-interest. So therefore you can have some support in changing your self-interest and to stepping into your self-interest, which again so many of us feel at work and in our personal life is contrary to what we are supposed to do, because again we may not be nice, we may not be so liked. And as more and more researchers and women in management are saying that for a woman to succeed at work, she has to stop worrying about being nice. She has to start being concerned about being the best she can be at her job. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be nice at work, but it also means that shouldn't be your first filter that you run stuff through about how can I say this as pleasantly as possible. So now, do you have anything you want to add to that about nice at work, or?
Well, what I do want to add is that all of your outline, to me, the foundation is vulnerability.
Yes.
Because you have to be vulnerable to ask for support. Yes. You have to be vulnerable to have those conversations with your girlfriends or your family and your children. And through my own journey, I've learned how to be vulnerable because that's so critical. So that means asking for help. And, you don't have to, be at someone's doorstep on your knees, but it's, hey, I'm struggling with this thing, or, I know that we have this issue because I've heard you use girly thoughts. You share your pain with me, and I hear that. So how about we do this thing together? But if you're not willing to be vulnerable, you'll always be sort of enslaved to those thoughts.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's about being vulnerable, and to build on that, courageous, that you actually share with somebody, I've got this, I know you've got this, and I'm going to start the conversation. So, and that
Right.
will give your friends permission to have the conversation if you start it. So,
Absolutely.
Next, very important, I have in the book, I only deal with, by the way, the book is about, 190 pages. I deal with 16 girly thoughts, and to get people thinking. But under each of these 16 girly thoughts, I also share where they originate, so therefore you will not think it's you, that somehow you have created this, it's your fault. We are marketed to significantly. For example, I'm fat. All these new diet ads come out when? Right at the beginning of the new year, when everybody has indulged themselves, and they're geared towards women. They're not geared towards men, because we have this societal notion that we are fat. And with the concern about obesity, I think part of that is so many women, and I know I have felt this on occasion, feel, okay, I'm heavy, screw it, I'm going to eat that piece of chocolate cake, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to take care of me because I deserve the extra effort that eating healthy is going to do for me. Another step in detoxing is to really take action to change this thought. And how we detox from our girly thoughts is one thought at a time. We can erase it, and laughter helps. Laughing at ourselves is a great way of taking something, and by laughing at it, we make it nothing. And we can put in a new thought. Every time, you know, for example, if we're thinking, you know, that we feel fat and we laugh at that, we can put in a new thought that says, I really love my body. Look at my curves. You know, I'm really delicious. You know, we can put in new thinking about ourselves that will help us. And when we start detoxing, we can notice the difference in ourselves that even changing one girly thought has. I'm writing a blog now about girly thoughts in Lent. And I'm going to be challenging everyone that for Lent to give up a girly thought and just see what difference that makes in their life by giving up one girly thought. You know, what space does that create? What energy does that shift for you? Now I'd like you to, you know, encourage you to enjoy your life more with even one less girly thought. And maybe today you can start that. You know, even if you just do it for 24 hours, give up one girly thought. And you know, if you're really missing it, you can go back to it tomorrow. But see what life is like for you when you give up one of the major ways you're beating yourself up. I have this 8-session Women's Empowerment curriculum. If any of you are interested in this, please feel free to email me through my website. And also, you can subscribe to my blog, which is free. You know, I'd love to have you there, and send me comments and questions also through my website. So I have the book that just came out, the curriculum coming out, and I'd love to speak to you and learn what you have to say. So hopefully you put in some questions that we'll be getting to in a minute. And Sanaa, is this where you take over?
Yeah, you're gonna continue to progress the slides, and we're gonna.
Okay. Of course, I forgot this one last thing. We're going to be doing another mastermind class that's really on money and work. You work hard for your money, so how are your girly thoughts costing you at work and in your financial planning? You can register for this now. It's on March 11th, 7 to 8 p.m. And, you know, I look forward to having you there and to getting to know some of you, hopefully, before that, through our email and through conversations that we'll have. So.
And this is a good one. You know, I've been working with Patricia on the mastermind because I know that a lot of questions I get are around, as HR professionals, we're still employees, and how do we negotiate our salaries at hire, or how do we negotiate our salaries at performance review? And really, it's not just about that one moment in time. Everything we do, we think, plays into how we present ourselves to gain the money that we deserve for the roles we play for our companies. And it's really a bigger picture. So I'm really excited to dive a little deeper into that particular girly thought, and hopefully you guys will join us and tell your other HR girlfriends and other colleagues about it. Honestly, this mastermind will be great for anyone who shows up for work for someone else and who wants more out of their work and the value. So that's great. And of course, if you want to learn more about HR Girlfriends, we are online. We've got a lot of exciting things happening. And so you can check us out there. Of course, our social media outlets. And we will now be taking questions. So, Pat, let's see what we have in here.
Oh, goody. Questions.
So there's been some conversation about, someone says that she's entering into her 40s and she's very concerned about her marketability and the competition she has with younger women, and I would assume in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, can you speak to your experiences in reference to the women that you encounter where they're either looking to grow in their organization or to move on to grow in their career, and how age plays a part?
Well, I think probably and that's a wonderful, wonderful question. The biggest way that age plays a part in, I think, is how we feel shame about our aging. And so we kind of start going around with a little bit of a gray cloud, and then it becomes a darker cloud over our heads as we attempt to kind of hide our age or fudge our age, or, as opposed to presenting ourselves with the life experience we have with enthusiasm, with joy. It doesn't have to be an issue. We make it an issue. Does society say it's an issue? Yes. Many of the top models are 14 years old, and they are photoshopped, so therefore there's an additional 10 inches off their waist, and their skin is buffed to the point that really does look more like porcelain than skin. But that doesn't mean that that is the image that we are supposed to project. So us feeling better about ourselves is going to make whoever is interviewing us feel better about us and our credentials. And so challenge yourself to not be defeated by age in your 40s or in your 50s or 60s. Challenge yourself and see what that does when you take that away as a barrier for you, how you are able to literally step in your power by not seeing that as an obstacle, and then have some fun with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have someone else here who was talking about the ad campaigns that organizations have put on, and she mentioned Pantene telling women to stop apologizing, and it's really interesting to watch, she says, because oftentimes our girly thoughts make us preface things we say with sorry.
Yes.
So yes. What's your take on that?
Oh my God, I think a year ago, thereabouts, did this blog that I invite you all to find on my on my blogosphere. It was a poetry slam with Lily Myers, and she this predates the Pantene ad campaign, which is more recent. And she said she realized that in genetics class, every time she raised her hand, she was apologizing. That she realized that at home, anytime she was disagreeing with anybody, she was apologizing. That her brother didn't have the same constraints. And she says at one point that while her family has taught him to step into his life, her family has taught her to step back from her life. Powerful, powerful. As women, we have been taught to say, I'm sorry. So one wonderful exercise that I have in my book that you can, certainly try now is to, when you're about to say, I'm sorry, figure out what else you can say. Like, that's too bad. As opposed to I'm sorry, or that must be hard, gee, as opposed to I'm sorry. We take on responsibility for things that really have nothing to do with us. And it's our way of expressing empathy, except it's not heard that way. It's heard as some weird thing we're doing. It makes often men uncomfortable. So what else can we say, and can each of you who are here today figure out what would work for you, and even write down different phrases and then start practicing, because probably by this afternoon you'll have an occasion where you may want to feel like saying I'm sorry, but if you don't say that, what do you say? So that's a good one.
That is a good one. I know that it's funny, in HR, you're always delivering a lot of information about what people typically a lot of times can't do, or what their parameters are. And sometimes I just thought, like, am I apologizing for the federal law? Do I always start off with, I'm so sorry? Seriously, I'm thinking about that. And, I have tried lately not really I don't know what the switch was, but I started lately saying things like, in writing especially, I can understand that you would feel that way. Just sort of switching my language because I was feeling powerless in the way I was communicating in person. So I thought I would try to communicate stronger in writing and see how that would help me verbally in my space because I'm a pretty assertive person. I pretty much know how to handle myself in corporate environments, but you still have those girly thoughts. You still want to apologize for things that are out of your control. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that really is a good one. And as you're saying, there are lots of ways of playing with that, experimenting, try one thing today and try something else tomorrow, but have that be that girly thought that's now made conscious right in front of you, and you say, hey, that's a girly thought. What else can I do? And that's how we learn. That's how we grow, and that's how we can support each other in doing this. Team up with a friend at work and say, no more I'm sorry. Anytime you say that, I'm going to step on your foot, and you do the same for me.
Seriously. I've got another question here from Veronica. She says, can you speak to being in an organization where women and men say things like, we'll look that up after you give your professional opinion or input, or they ask you to print it out or email them a link so they can read it for themselves? That adds to her girly thoughts. Can you speak to that?
Well, it seems like she may be saying things which are maybe a step above where other people are. And so that's kind of interesting to kind of strategize. So it seems like she's really smart and other people are not so smart and not so quick. So maybe going in armed, I don't know, with handouts and saying, I'm going to talk about this, and here's some reference material for those of you who would like to know more, and then go on with her spiel. So therefore, she takes the initiative in that, and her power isn't muted by people's questioning, because that could almost be seen as kind of a questioning that happens about, oh, are you really right, in this? So here's some reference material. Please feel free. We can take this up next time when we meet if any of you have questions, or feel free to email questions you may have to me, but blah, blah, blah. Here we go.
I've actually had that same problem because from time to time I'm offended when someone questions my intellectual and knowledgeable authority. It's like, so this is my role and you have a totally different function, and together we're working and you're relying upon my knowledge. So what's so wrong with what I'm telling you? Why do you need to check up behind me? And sometimes, again, talking myself off the ledge, I have to tell myself that just because I know it doesn't mean that they don't want to dive deeper. And maybe they really want to know, not because they're questioning what I'm saying, but that they want an understanding for themselves. And that maybe what I've given them has piqued their interest. And whether that's true or not, I've tried not to get offended by it, although sometimes it creeps up, and I do. Or when my CEO copies and pastes the definition of furlough versus layoff, and I'm chuckling going, I know what that means. Thank you so very much. And I'm questioning myself going, I just told you what that meant, and you looked it up, and you Googled, and now you're copying and pasting because I didn't phrase it the way Google said it, and you just want to be sure. So I can totally relate.
Yeah, and one thing, I kind of like playing and like being in people's faces. Part of that's, I think, a function of just having done this a while. It's like I'm not so worried. But if this begins to be an issue, Veronica, in your organization, then maybe you also ask other people for reference material about their topics, and maybe in a funny way you help raise the level of information and discourse, because it will then become maybe expected that if you're going to talk about something, you're also going to furnish information to the group about it. Take this crisis and make it an opportunity for you to step into a leadership role and help people begin to better document what's going on.
That's a good one. So, Patricia, we've got 3 minutes, and I've got another good question.
Okay.
Katrina wants to know, what is your input on how Girly Thoughts started as a good thing, maybe as precaution or perceived awareness? We recognize it has taken a negative turn, but how do we turn these thoughts positive when we can't prevent them from coming because of years of being this way or thinking this way?
Yeah, really good point. You know, our mothers protected us. Why? Were our mothers weird? No, the world is not a safe place for women, you know. We all know that. We don't need to turn on the TV and see the latest horrific gender-based something for women. So, you know, we can take in the love. I know I've done that with my mother and my grandmother and how protective they were about things that really had nothing to do with me, and feel the love without feeling that I have to take care of myself in that way. The way women have to take care of themselves is not wearing girdles. That was a big thing with my mother. But in stepping up at work, you know. So it's like, if we can feel the love that came in from our, you know, generations of women and struggle and solutions in our families, and see how that can really be used to nurture us so we do now what is appropriate in our lifetime for ourselves and to model for our daughters. And so therefore they can feel the support and love and understanding to fight these demons, to fight these battles, because they're different battles now than they were. I mean, we've gotten the seat at the table, but we still have to look pretty. In the 70s, we were fighting to get a seat at the table. So we're there now. So now we've got to do the next level.
Gotcha. So our final question, Pat, is, are girly thoughts really another name for insecurities?
Well, I think they're gender-based specific insecurities. You know, people ask me, well, do men have girly thoughts? No, they have their own thoughts that are very different, but also handicap them. I mean, so it's not that, you know, they're scot-free, but it is gender-based insecurity. But it's specifically gender-based because guys don't. I have had so many women tell me that they, you know, feel insecure in a meeting because they're having a bad hair day. My husband's losing his hair. He has never once said to me he can't go to work because he's having a bad hair day. I mean,
right.
You know, it's just different. It's really, really different.
Absolutely. Well, Patricia, this has been such a great hour with you. I am so excited about the masterclass next month, and we look forward to hearing more from you about Girly Thoughts. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you have a good day, and we'll see you and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.